Jackie, for the introduction. I'm very glad to be with you all today to talk about the National Museum of Natural History's Repatriation Office and my vision for its future. I've worked since 2001 in the repatriation program, and I remember when I interviewed back in 2001, I was asked, why do you want this job? And the job was to be a case officer, what we now call a tribal liaison. I remember answering, well, if I say I'm not sure that I really do, you'll think that I'm wasting everyone's time. But it was a choice to make. You know, do I want to put myself into this position? I also remember that I said, having experience in both sides of the issue, by which I meant being Native American and being an archaeologist, I thought that I could work effectively in repatriation. Over the next 22 years, I was able to work with many tribes and tribal representatives, and I'm grateful for these experiences. Thank you to those of you who are in the room right now. There are so many of you that helped me and that taught me, and thank you for walking with me through to this day. I'd like to reflect a little on how I came to be here today, and oh, great. Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, now I can hear myself. I'd like to reflect a little on how I came to be here today, and I'm going to go back a few years, back to the origin of my people, in fact. When the people decided to move from lands in the West, they were led by two brothers, Choctaw and Choctaw, who used a magical pole as a guide. Each night, they placed the pole in the ground, and in the morning, it would point in the direction in which they should travel. After a long time, they arrived at a place where the pole stood upright. They had carried the bones of our ancestors and placed them around the pole and raised a great mound on top. This is our mother mound, Naniwaya. We Choctaw were always meant to remain near her, and during the Trail of Tears, tribal members stood on the banks of the Mississippi River and sang farewell to her before our removal to Oklahoma. When I think about the people whose remains we repatriate, I wonder about their distinct personalities and idiosyncrasies. They lived their lives just as we did, and when they were undertaking important actions like the migration from the West, they likely took this step by step. They would have had to gather their supplies, organize people to carry the remains, make arrangements for the children and elders to travel comfortably. Surely some people were cranky, some were fearful, and some were reluctant to undertake the journey. But eventually they arrived at the day when someone finally said, "Let's begin." And they did. And those actions gave rise to my own today. I agreed to take on this job with full understanding of the challenges that come along with it. And I can't believe it now, but I agreed to come on board the day that the first of the recent Washington Post articles ran about Alice Hrdlička's collections of human remains. I thought it would probably be good for the museum to be able to say that my hiring was not prompted by outside pressure. And I don't think it was. When I was interviewed, the main questions I got were related to my vision for change. And the questions I asked were about the museum's commitment to change. I would not have taken on this role if I were merely coming on board to be a caretaker for the status quo. This slide shows some of the challenges of doing the work we do. It's easy to think that the work is up here on the surface, that we're working in repatriation and it's just up at the top. But in fact, the experience runs all the way through the years of settler colonialism. It's not a simple thing to work in repatriation. As a Chatahoyo, a Choctaw woman, I've always related to the people whose remains and belongings are in the museum in a different way from other staff. And I have a different experience of working in the museum. I remember when the human remains of Native people were kept in green cabinets in the hallways of the anthropology department. If you've seen Tim McEwen's book, he's got a photo on the cover of those cabinets. I remember having to assess my feelings and state of mind when deciding whether to go upstairs to the library. Sometimes everything was fine, and I greeted the people whose remains were there and passed along in a companionable silence. Sometimes I couldn't bring myself to walk past the cabinets that showed that, had I been born a century earlier, I would not have been thought to be fully human. In the early years of working in the building, I thought that this was just my burden to bear, and that if I were a stronger person, I might be able to get over it. What I realize now is that I should have asked for mental hazard pay. Over my 20+ years in repatriation work at the Natural History Museum, many experiences stand out as illustrating the nature of the museum and its approaches to working with tribes. One example involves my work with repatriating the remains of the daughter of a Choctaw chief. Hers was the last burial before removal to Indian Territory. I'd been working in the office for about 5 years when the case came up, and I had made a promise to her that I wouldn't leave until I was able to see her go home. When it came time to address the case, I was told that I could not work on the report because it would be a conflict of interest. I was eventually allowed to work on the case, and when writing the report, I included my tribe's origin narrative just as I related it to you now. When the report was reviewed by other members of the office, I was asked for a citation for the narrative because it was not considered to be valid unless it had been written down and published. These two incidences illustrated division in how the academic perspective at the museum struggled to accommodate the realities of Indigenous experience. I ended up citing Ian Thompson's dissertation for the origin narrative, and I was honored to be present when this ancestor was finally reburied. It was a profound experience to be able to keep my promise to her. I'm giving you these examples to give you a sense of what I'm not going to say to you. I won't speak about the worst hazards of the job or about the deepest challenges I faced. I was in a deep depression for about a year over a tribe's reaction to the museum's denial of a repatriation request. I clawed my way out of that by coming to the realization that I had been trying to take responsibility for the actions of the very people who would have seen me as a museum specimen had I been born in the 19th century. I eventually made a pledge to myself that I would not take the fall for settler colonialism. I did not have a hand in the actions that led to the creation of the Repatriation Office. I only have the responsibility to help make things better for the people whose remains and belongings are with us, and to help their relatives see them safely home. When I applied for the job of program manager for repatriation, again, I was asked why I want the job. And I replied, I know that I have the experience and the vision to help the program evolve, and I want to be the one to lead us into the future. My years of working in the office have allowed me to identify challenges and areas for improvement. I'm able to see what some of the great opportunities are for the museum to begin to work in what my director calls a tribally centric repatriation process. There's a lot of work ahead of us, but I can tell you that I have the strongest support from the museum's leadership to do this work. The National Museum of Natural History is the original Smithsonian museum. Our collections date back to the mid-19th century. Some of our museum practices do as well. Change will not be easy for some in our museum to understand, but I can see how to bring people forward because at the foundation, anthropologists are interested in people. I think that even the most resistant curators can see now that repatriation is not a political ploy or something that only activists are interested in. These were some of the assumptions that were made by anthropologists in the 1980s. What I want to help the holdouts in the museum understand is that repatriation is not a conflict of interest if we are both interested in the well-being of the people involved. One of the challenges relates to our previous actions. We have many good connections with tribal nations and with individuals, and I am grateful for these. But we have many cases where careful tending is required to bring us into good relationship with communities. It will take time and attention and consultation to repair some of our network, and I'm committed to doing the necessary work. We can only do good repatriation work if we are trustworthy and open. And when we build this trust back, it gives us a foundation for any difficult work that lies ahead. The length of our repatriation queue is a distinct challenge. We addressed requests in the order in which they're received. Each case can take months, if not years, to resolve, and this pushes new requests further back in time. Our queue will hopefully be reduced with the addition of new staff, bringing the office up to full strength for the first time in almost 15 years. In addition to having more people to address the requests, I see the new staff members as bringing valuable perspectives on repatriation and on anthropology in general. The NMNH Department of Anthropology has not been able to hire permanent staff who represent the most recent generations of scholarship. The tribal liaisons who come on board will have studied in the time period in which NAGPRO is an accepted fact. This alone will help change departmental perspectives. We can also reevaluate our process to find efficiencies that will allow us to address requests in a more timely manner. I plan for our office to do a complete assessment of the repatriation process to determine how to decrease the amount of time it takes us to respond to a request for repatriation. I told myself when I was writing this that I wasn't going to make a promise that I couldn't keep. I do not yet know what the revised process for repatriation will look like, but I do know that we will move more quickly in responding to repatriation requests. I'm going to repeat that. We will move more quickly in responding to repatriation requests. It may be hard to reassess and revise a repatriation process, but I am not afraid. When I came to my mantra that I do not take the fall for settler colonialism, I also came to a realization about myself as a fighter. Many of you may not know that I'm a pre-ICWA adoptee. I always knew I was Choctaw, but I had to make my own way back to the point of being part of my community. I also had to spend a lot of money to hire a lawyer to break open my adoption record so I could become enrolled in the tribe. What I found is that one of my Choctaw family names derives from the word Homa, or red. When it's used as a personal name, it refers to warriors. It gives me great comfort in my new job to have this name because it means they do not back down from a fight. I'll turn to some of our opportunities. One of the more important community-based projects of the Repatriation Office has been the series of workshops held on human osteology. Led by staff of the Repatriation Office Osteology Laboratory, these workshops are tailored to each tribe's cultural protocols and scholarly needs. I see these workshops as evidence of the museum's growth and understanding how we can relate to tribal communities. When I was new in my job at the museum, I had proposed exactly this kind of workshop, only to be told that this was not within the purview of the office and wasn't something we could spend our time on. Today, these workshops allow us to put the museum's scholarship in the hands of tribal members who are working as monitors, as archaeologists, and as repatriation professionals. And we can go further, adapting the workshop structure to other areas of interest. Tribal educators who teach culture camps could make extensive use of the collections, and we could connect remotely with students across the country during the camps. We did this last summer, or guess it was 2 summers ago, when Choctaw PhD student Jennifer Byram was at the museum studying archaeological textiles. Conservation, the use of archives, collections management work are all areas that could be possibly subjects for workshops. And I'm mindful of how much staff time the museum has that we could allot to these projects. I'm kind of imagining broadly, because I think it doesn't do any good to be conservative when you're trying to be creative. When I think about these kinds of projects, I'm putting them in the category of what the museum can do to support tribal initiatives and address tribal needs. The museum has resources that it should be using in service to tribes. We often hear from tribes during repatriation consultations about these needs, and I want the museum to have more opportunities to respond. Before I conclude, I just wanted to say that I'll be here through tomorrow, probably early afternoon. I have my laptop. I can connect back into the museum's databases, and anyone who needs anything, lists from the museum, copies of our guidelines and procedures, information about our Recovering Voices programs, fellowships, anything like that, come and find me, because I can run lists for you just sitting here. I was going to go sit in one of the ballrooms, but I kind of want to hear the next speakers. So please, just reach out. So to conclude, sometimes when I'm envisioning a project, I like to formulate a description of it as if I could see it in existence, and we're describing it back to myself. And so when I was interviewing for the job, here's how I described the Repatriation Office. The Repatriation Office consults, collaborates, and works alongside tribes in the process of repatriating tribal ancestors, their belongings, and important cultural items. The office is valued by the museum for providing vision and leadership on engagement with communities and for its innovative collaborative projects. So I described it that way to the museum, and I think it's a good description, but this is my actual vision. The Repatriation Office will not cause harm to communities through our work. It sounds simple, and I intended that way. It acknowledges our past, and it looks to the future. It gives us a solid guide to moving our work ahead. But it's a low bar. Here's a higher one. Is it possible to do our work so that it brings joy? Maybe. I hope so. Our work in repatriation has been to return ancestors and important belongings. Through this, we support tribes so that we can continue to maintain cultural values and practices. Many of the collections that are being repatriated were collected during a time of salvage anthropology. Anthropologists thought that tribes were going to die out. The irony was lost on the anthropologists that by taking these important items away from the tribe, they were contributing to the loss of cultural knowledge. But repatriation work is also a way to affirm tribal sovereignty and to promote cultural well-being. It also shows us how the museum can continue to maintain itself as a culturally relevant entity. It has not been the end of science or cause the emptying of collections, but it points us towards a vibrant future. When I was interviewing for my job as Repatriation Program Manager, I thought back to my Choctaw ancestors, and I said, yes, this journey may be long, but we are not unprepared. Yes, it takes courage, but now let's begin. Thank you.
As we get prepared for people who might have questions in the audience, we have 3 questions that are from here. We can obviously go back and forth. The first one was a request for Jackie, just to let you know that the Meskwaki tribe has been waiting 7 years for NMAI to deal with the bear claw request, and they were hoping for a follow-up, and since they're not here in person, they wanted to make sure to mention that to you. And that follows along with just the question, what is the current wait time for repatriation staff to get a request or claim through with both of your institutions?
Okay, good. To make sure it was on. Meskwaki Nation, heard you, check. I don't think that we have a claim from you. I don't think that, call us, contact me, reach out to us, and be happy to enter into a discussion and see what we can do. It's, got, phone call, text, email, reach out to us. So the question, and let me make sure I understand, because it's the question about the length of time. Shelley, could you repeat that part, just so I want to make sure that we clarify that?
Yes, so I'm literally verbatim going to do it this time. If NMAI, and I'm interested in making sure we have this for both of the institutions because that's helpful for everyone. If NMAI is taking questions, I'd appreciate knowing what the current wait time is for the repatriation staff to get to a request or claim. They reported quite a backlog when I did preliminary consultation with them almost 2 years ago. They estimated the wait time was estimated at 3 years.
That's probably correct. We have 3 staff members on staff at NMAI that do repatriation research. One is dedicated to our human remains, and that's the proactive work. We don't actually have any claims for human remains, and as I mentioned earlier, that's a very small number, but one is one too many, we know. So we have an individual who honors that founding principle that there should be no ancestral remains under our stewardship, and that is that researcher's role. And that's 2 researchers who will work on claims-based claims. So we might get a claim in that has 1, or it might have 500 or more. And so we take the claims in as they come, and we work with tribes to make sure that we're addressing a claim. Do we need to break it down in 1 or more reports? And we really work very closely and make sure that we give all the time and attention that's due that claim that's been waiting, that's come next. At NMAI, our board has sole authority, and they meet 3-4 times a year. And so we kind of do project management, and we work backwards, like what report do we want to get to what meeting, and then we work back from that. And it can take anywhere, once a case is assigned, and that's where the question comes in. Once a case is assigned, it could take anywhere from 12-18 months to work on a case because of the internal research depth of the report, like how many items are we talking about. So we generally say 12 to 18 months. It may be less than that, might be just slightly more than that. We do have a claims queue. It is longer than 3 years. I would not know right off the top of my head where that is, but here recently we just received in two more claims. And so it does create a backlog, and it is time consuming. And we only have a finite number of staff. And so with that, that's the reality at NMEI at the moment. But to switch to a more positive note, because I want Dorothy to have time to respond to this, that, when you're talking about putting your money where your mouth is, that's what natural history is in the process of doing with their new hires.
Thank you. Yes, it can take a long time under our current practice to address a repatriation request. And we have requests that we're addressing that came in many, many, many years ago. So a new request coming in today, it could be many years before that rises to the top of the queue. That's under our, I've been thinking of how things were when I was in the position of tribal liaison, and there were 2 tribal liaisons addressing the requests. When we are up to full strength, there will be 4. But then again, I'm also looking towards our practices to see where I can cut down on the length of time it will take to address each request. So, right, with us not having the staff in place and with us not having our policies and practices adjusted, yes, it can take many years, but this is what I'm saying to you is that it will not be like this in the future. We are going to go quicker.
My name is Mary Baker, and I'm gonna come at you with a question. I want to say thank you for stepping up to the positions, because sometimes we're kind of taking on that role of like dropping our shield and becoming the one that takes all the arrows and everything, because working for the Smithsonian or the Museum of Natural History, it's kind of like they're the biggest thieves within the United States, and they have their own laws and statutes and everything. So you're talking about like quickening the process to repatriate items. What if the item doesn't really necessarily have to go through a government to government, because it has nothing to do with who's sitting on tribal business council, because tribal business councils, no offense to any one tribe or representation or whatever. I was a NAGPRA coordinator for my tribe like a year ago. But ever since the beginning of starting on that career path or whatever, it was like 4 years I was in there trying to repatriate this one item. It was a bundle, and I feel very guilty for dropping that ball, because that bundle needs to go back to the family. Inherently, there's one individual that's still alive practicing that big ceremony for all of us Mandans, only with half of what they need. You guys got the other half. You're sitting up here, and I'm gonna have a conversation with you later on, because that's a big ball to drop for my Mandan tribal members, and I'm going to say, okay, you're promising quicken recovery to the tribes for things. Hold on to your guns, because you need that backbone too. You just promised a big promise. There's a lot of us that might have a lot of anger. It's not supposed to be meant for you. You're really trying to not cry. It's a really big responsibility for all of us to be trying to coordinate bringing items home, because it's resurrecting a lot of our identity. It's nice to see indigenous peoples in positions like you, especially women. Men, we've been missing that recognition that we're fucking powerful. I'll fucking say it. Women, it's the women that are making the reparations to the shit that men fucked up. Sorry, I'm not fucking sorry for saying that shit. But, you know, we do need to help one another. Male, female, doesn't matter. But I really, I do want to thank you for stepping into that position, step into your power too. You have a lot either behind you. It's good to hear that, you know, you recognize that sense of self. You were adopted out and you did make your way back into where you were supposed to be. Protected and guided. Beautiful, because you would have never had all those experiences to bring you to frontline. You know what I mean? I'm just gonna say that, recognize that, because we don't encourage enough each other we don't encourage each other enough for the work that we do. But you made a big promise today, man, and I'm gonna have a conversation with you later, because that deserves intimate conversations and privacy with the respect to the bundle. I don't know if I had a question, but I just, you know, took advantage of, there's a mic here and there's accountability, there's a whole ass crowd right here and right there too. Right on.
Thank you so much.
We have, following up on Mary's,
I just
I'm
wanted
sorry.
to say, thank you so much, Mary, for what you've said, and I will look forward to speaking with you about this.
I'm sorry.
Can I just respond to Mary? Because I think I actually have something relevant to tell her. Where did she go? Hey, Mary. It's been a while. I just want to let you know. When you were the rep for the tribe, you came to NMAI asking about this item. And we were in the process of talking about that and moving it through the next stage, and then, you know, changes happen, right? But I'm speaking a little out of turn, but I feel like you asked a public question, you deserve a public answer. We have been in touch with the lineal descendant, and we are in the process of doing that. More importantly, remember I said we had a queue, you put in a claim, you know, when it gets there, there it goes, right? And it works its way through the process. But because of the circumstances of that, what happened and what happened in the past, we pieced together, let's just say, because I really don't want to go too much into detail, we pieced together enough information, enough of what was originally established, and we determined that we had what we needed to go forth with a process, and in doing so, we would honor the original date of the information submitted. And ironically, the date ends exactly in this moment in time, and it was elevated, and the case is actively being worked on right now. So I wanted to relay that to you, and, you know, I don't mean to embarrass Risa. Risa Arbolino is actually the researcher working on that exact case. And so maybe you guys can talk, but that's, you know, in a different role. I understand you have different, now that you're in that role, we're only going to be able to, you know, talk about so much. But I did want to let you know that, because, you know, that's something that we take to heart. We take that very seriously. And it would have been, you know, considering the full breadth of the case and the situation, inappropriate not to elevate it and honor the dates that we originally started with because of past circumstances. So.
I'm sorry, I finally freaking remembered my question, but maybe you could just sit on it, and maybe it could, like, whatever. But I know that with the Smithsonian, they have different rules. Do you still have to prove to the board what you need, because when it comes to deaccessioning for the Smithsonian, I mean, I don't know, whatever. I just wanted to always ask, what the fuck is up with that? Like, why do you have to prove with this whole freaking presentation? Like, that's not how it goes down traditionally. So I'm just gonna say that too. Like, I hope that changes within you guys' way how you operate, you know? That's asking a lot.
Thank you. We actually have absolutely everything we need, and including the TIPO's blessing to say, hey, you should go the lineal descendant route, which is, that's the path it's going.
And apologies over here, we're back here in the corner, so we can't read your faces, and I do apologize for stepping on your toes there. We have, Jackie, there was a question for you that was notification of Section 106 consultation is not the same as initiation of Section 106 consultation. In short, the letter will start the process, but not complete or fulfill it. So what's next then after that happens?
I don't know, we don't do 106. Is that good? We don't do 106. So 106 is under NAGPRA, and we are under the National Museum of the American Indian Act, the two laws in the US. And so
Do they really mean Section 106
That is what is written.
of the National Historic Preservation Act? So that's, if so, that's something that's outside of the scope of repatriation.
Sorry, the chat ends up going in different places. That appears to be the case. If it's not, if my person can please just write in the chat to clarify, we would appreciate it.
Hi, thank you again for your presentation. It's much appreciated. I just wanted to see if you could offer any recommendations that the public can advocate for policy change or lobby administration to allocate more funds to your department to help address that backlog. Is there a way that we can, advocate or push for these large institutions to address that?
Amen, bless your heart. Yeah, I mean, I would think that there are plenty of ways and opportunities to advocate that. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's federal funding, but write letters. No, I think that the Smithsonian has also made some significant cultural museum shifts and practices, and there's the new policy on shared stewardship and ethical returns that was implemented last year, and it's a new commitment, and there's going to be a lot of provenance research and a lot of necessity, and it's just rolling out, but that really quite literally applies to the whole of Smithsonian. I mean, let's be realistic, nobody's going to get back the American flag, right? But it really opens it up kind of to the worldwide, peoples, internationally. But repatriation is something that will be addressed under the law, and that has more sort of finite terms to it. So, if there is a way that folks are so inclined, I'm sure our secretary would love to hear from you. But I think it would be great, wherever those avenues are, to advocate for that, because it does take resources and staff to do that work. Thank you. Thank you all for your time and attention.